Right now, 1 in every 4 people on the planet is walking around with a fatty liver, and it has nothing to do with drinking alcohol. It comes from sugar. The most frustrating part of this whole situation is that most of these people think they're doing everything right by skipping the beer, eating more fruit, and sipping on juice, yet their liver is still quietly drowning. What nobody bothers to tell you is that fructose, the sugar hiding in your juice, your fruit snacks, and even your healthy granola bars, gets processed by your liver using the exact same pathway as alcohol. You end up with the same fat buildup, the same inflammation, and eventually the same disease. If a doctor looks at a liver destroyed by years of heavy drinking next to one ruined by years of clean eating under a microscope, those two organs look identical. By the time we finish this video, you'll know exactly which sugars are hitting your liver like a stiff drink and which ones are actually safe to eat. You can think of your liver like a filter at a water treatment plant, where clean water usually flows through without any issues. When things are running smoothly, the plant handles the load easily by processing a small portion and keeping the rest moving, which is exactly how your body treats glucose. When you eat things like bread, rice, or potatoes, your system breaks them down into glucose and ships that fuel out to your muscles and brain. Since your liver only has to handle about 20% of that load, the rest of your body steps up to burn it for energy immediately. Fructose doesn't work like that at all. Every single gram of fructose you swallow has one solitary destination, which is the liver. There is no bypass and no way to share that workload with the rest of your body, because every bit of it shows up at that one filter all at once. Your liver has to deal with 100% of that sugar alone, and instead of a slow drip the system can manage, it feels like a massive flood hitting a drain built for a tiny trickle. The way the liver handles that pressure is where things get really uncomfortable. When the organ gets slammed with more fructose than it can possibly use for energy, it switches over to the only backup plan it has and starts converting the excess into fat. Your liver cells begin producing tiny fat droplets and storing them right there in the tissue, a process researchers call de novo lipogenesis, which is just a fancy way of saying making new fat from scratch. The scary part is that alcohol triggers this exact same process through the same biological machinery, making fructose and alcohol metabolic twins that just happen to arrive in different glasses. Instead of leaving the body, those fat droplets sit inside the liver cells and build up over months and years until the organ becomes puffy and sluggish. Eventually, the tissue starts to inflame, and the organ that is supposed to be filtering your blood and balancing your hormones is forced to spend all its energy managing a fat storage problem it was never designed for. There is also a second hit that most people never see coming. As your liver breaks down fructose, it produces a waste product called uric acid, which is the same stuff that shows up when you drink alcohol. High levels of uric acid in your blood can push your blood pressure up and eventually trigger a painful case of gout. While most people associate gout with drinking way too much beer, very few people realize it could be coming from the glass of apple juice they had with breakfast. The most unsettling part of this discovery is seeing who it actually affects. We aren't just talking about people eating fast food every day, or people who know they have a bad diet. This is happening to people who cut out alcohol specifically to protect their health, swapped their soda for juice, and started buying natural products, never realizing that the fructose was still getting through. Soda is the obvious villain here, and by now, everyone knows it belongs on the bad list. But the story gets a lot messier when you look at what else is delivering fructose straight to your liver every day, especially since most of it doesn't look anything like junk food. High fructose corn syrup is the version that shows up everywhere because food manufacturers figured out decades ago that it was cheaper to produce than regular sugar and significantly sweeter by volume. They started putting it in everything from bread and ketchup to flavored yogurt, salad dressing, sports drinks, and even pasta sauce. You can pick up a bottle of something that has absolutely no reason to be sweet, flip it over, and find corn syrup sitting in the top 3 ingredients. It isn't there to improve the quality of the food, but rather because it's cheap and it triggers a biological response that makes you want to eat more. But the part that trips people up even more than the hidden additives is fruit juice. It isn't soda or candy, so it feels like health in a glass. And for years, it was exactly what parents poured for their kids every morning with a doctor's blessing. However, a standard 8-ounce glass of orange juice carries roughly the same fructose load as a can of Coke, which means the same amount of sugar hits your liver and starts the exact same metabolic process. The fruit it came from was perfectly fine, but the act of squeezing it into a glass and stripping out the fiber turned it into something the liver treats exactly like a soft drink. That fiber difference is everything. When you eat a whole orange, the fiber in the pulp physically slows down how fast the fructose moves through your digestive system, allowing your liver to receive a slow, manageable trickle over an hour or two. Because of that pace, the liver handles the sugar without triggering fat production. If you drink the juice instead, you've removed that break entirely. So the fructose hits the bloodstream fast, and your liver gets the same kind of flood as before, just with a 100% natural label on the bottle. The downstream effect of that flood is visceral fat, which is the kind that builds up around your internal organs rather than just under your skin. People often call the result a beer belly, but nutritionists who started seeing this specific pattern in non-drinkers began calling it a sugar belly instead. It involves the same mechanism, appears in the same location, and carries the same health risks, so the only real difference is what happened to be in the glass. This is where people start feeling genuinely confused and a little cheated because they thought they were doing the right things. They gave up alcohol, switched to juice, and started buying yogurt with bright fruit on the packaging while reading labels for obvious red flags. But nobody told them that the fructose doesn't care whether it arrived in a beer can or a no-added-sugar smoothie bottle, and the liver is running the same process either way. It builds the same fat, produces the same uric acid, and deals with the same slow damage, because the source of the sugar doesn't change the chemistry of the reaction. None of this means you have to give up sweetness forever, which isn't the point and, honestly, isn't even a realistic goal for most people. The reality is much simpler than that, as the form the sugar comes in changes everything about what your liver has to do with it once it arrives. The fiber rule is the one thing worth remembering from this entire video. If the sugar still has its fiber attached, meaning it's sitting inside a whole piece of fruit surrounded by pulp and skin, your liver gets a slow, controlled delivery it can actually work with. Once you strip that fiber out through juicing or refining, you've turned something manageable into something the liver has to scramble to handle. It is the exact same sugar, but the outcome is completely different depending entirely on whether the fiber made the trip into your system. So practically, what does that actually look like when you're standing in a kitchen or a grocery store? You should swap the orange juice for a whole orange. The sweetness is basically the same and the fructose content hasn't changed, but eating the orange means your liver gets that sugar spread out over time instead of all at once. That single change, if you do it consistently, results in a genuinely different outcome for your liver health. Flavored yogurt is another one that catches people off guard. A lot of popular brands marketed as healthy choices carry more sugar than a standard candy bar, and that fruit flavor mostly comes from added syrup rather than actual fruit. Swapping it for plain yogurt with a handful of real berries mixed in gets you the sweetness you want, keeps the fiber intact, and cuts the sugar load to a fraction of what it was before. Sports drinks are another area where the marketing has completely outrun the reality of the product. Most of them are essentially colored sugar water with a tiny amount of electrolytes added as a justification for the price tag. If you're genuinely active and sweating, water with a small pinch of salt and a squeeze of lemon does the same electrolyte job without sending a massive fructose flood to your liver. Granola bars are the version of this that bothers people most when they find out the truth, mainly because granola bars feel like a classic health food. They contain oats and nuts, but most commercial bars are held together with corn syrup or honey, and once that fiber-to-sugar ratio tips past a certain point, the liver gets the same signal it gets from a candy bar. A handful of almonds and a piece of fruit takes about the same time to eat, keeps you full longer, and ensures the fructose arrives bundled with fiber the whole way down. The label trick that actually works is to look at the ingredient list instead of the nutrition facts panel. If any form of sugar, like corn syrup, agave, honey, or cane juice, appears in the first 3 ingredients, the fiber is almost certainly gone, and the product is going to flood your liver. Manufacturers are required to list ingredients by volume, so whatever is highest on the list is what you're mostly eating. If sugar is in the top 3, that's the product's primary job. A lot of people feel some resistance here because it sounds like they're giving things up. But think about what's actually been happening inside your liver for years without you knowing, like the fat building up silently and the inflammation running in the background, while the organ works twice as hard on a job it was never designed to do full-time. Giving the liver a break isn't a punishment, but rather the first time in years it gets to operate the way it was built to. When the fructose flood stops coming in consistently, the liver finally starts clearing out the stored fat. Inflammation drops, and the organ that manages your cholesterol, your blood sugar, and your hormone balance starts doing those jobs properly again instead of spending all its resources on damage control. People who make these swaps often notice the difference within a few weeks, reporting better energy, less bloating, and sometimes a noticeable drop in that midsection puffiness. That isn't a coincidence, but rather the sign of a liver that finally has room to breathe. If you take only one thing away from this video, let it be the fact that fructose and alcohol use the exact same machinery in your liver to build fat and generate uric acid. This process is what eventually leads to disease, and the only real difference between a sugar that is safe and one that is dangerous comes down to whether the fiber is still attached. When that fiber stays intact, your liver can handle the load, but the moment you strip it away, your liver starts paying the price. I want you to try one simple swap for the next 7 days. Instead of trying to overhaul your entire life, just pick the liquid sugar you drink most often, like a soda or a sweetened coffee, and replace it with plain water or the actual whole fruit version. This isn't a forever commitment or a massive diet change, but doing this for just 1 week will let you see exactly how your body responds. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has officially become the most common liver condition on the planet, and it actually passed up alcoholic liver disease years ago. The gap between the two keeps widening every day, which means millions of people are walking around completely unaware that their reasonable diet is causing silent damage. You now understand the mechanics of this better than most people do, and that knowledge puts you in a position to fix the problem before it even starts.